question that people ask me because they really don't quite understand full practice authority. So this is really specific. It doesn't matter if you're an advanced practice nurse or not. You still need to really understand what full practice authority is. And you hear these words thrown around, but you really don't quite understand what it means for you. And so in my boot camp, I really do dive deep into like reduced practice, restricted practice, full practice authority, because the strategy that I'm going to give you on how to start your aesthetic practice is different depending on what state that you're in, and if you're a BSN or non-advanced practice nurse or an advanced practice nurse. So first of all, let me introduce myself, you guys. I'm going to bring this camera down. My name is Dr. Kiiyonna Jones. I'm owner and founder of Luxe Beauty and Wellness Boutique and Luxe Beauty and Wellness Academy. And I help nurses get to the bag. And I'm just going to say the bag. It depends on the way they're going to do it, either aesthetics, or, which is how I started, or either digitally creating courses and ebooks and just bringing value to other people's lives and solving problems for people and making money off. So I wanted to talk about full practice authority because that is a lot of what's happening right now in our current climate. And in the state of California, as some of you may know, that's the talk. It's like, oh my goodness, California is now going to be a full practice authority state. New York is a full practice authority state. Florida is a full practice authority state. And this is a lot of the time people don't quite understand. And I think that the lack of understanding is why they haven't started. Like, they've been thinking about it, but they haven't started because they don't quite understand like what this full practice stuff means. They don't really understand their role. And so one of my little issues with us as nurses, and I will say I'm guilty of this. So anytime I'm talking about you as a nurse, I'm really talking about myself because I did the same thing. But the issues that I have with us is we don't really take the time to own our licenses. And what I mean by that is there are licensed, but we don't really leverage the opportunities because we don't know. And we don't know because we haven't taken the time to know. And so for me, it's like I constantly have to educate the people in my boot camp just about and break it down from a perspective of like when you're working in hospital. Because what we do is we go to school, we invest all this money, we study for this test, we take this test, we pass this test, the license is ours, and then we go and work for the hospital and say, now tell us what we can and can't do, what the protocols is, we go to them for that. And we really don't know and understand why we are able to do the things that we are able to do. So essentially what we're doing is we're like, hey, I got this license. Now you make me an employee for something that I've worked so hard for. It's essentially what happens. So I want to talk about full practice authority because there are a lot of states now getting full practice authority. And I just want you to know that it's not one and the same. So just because a state has full practice authority, a lot of times there are differences in said states. Okay. So, and what I mean by that, I'll just give you an example. Florida is a state that is now full practice authority, and people tote that around and they're like, yeah, Florida is now full practice authority. So nurse practitioners have full practice, but it's like, hold up. That's in primary care. So if you are looking to get into aesthetics, you cannot practice independently. You still need a medical director. And not only do you need a medical director, there are certain criteria that the state of Florida requires for your medical director as it pertains to aesthetics, the aesthetics industry. In the state of California, for example, we are moving towards this full practice authority. And a lot of people think like on January 1st, 2023, magically, we are just going to be able to practice independently. No, that's not how it's going to work. As of now, when January 2023 happens, we can apply for transition to practice if we meet certain criteria. And there's 3. The first one is you have to have been working under a physician for 3 years or 4,600 hours, 3 years full time or 3,600 hours. So for those of you who are in nursing school and you're like, oh, I'm in nursing school, I'll be graduated next year in June, I'm just going to be able to practice independently. No, you have to have your hours. That's one thing. Nationally certified, they want you to have national certification. So that's either through AANP or I always get them confused. AANC or ANCC. I get them confused. One of the ones, whichever ones. You have to be certified nationally. Another thing you have to have for the state of California is, and a lot of people don't realize this, in order for you to actually, let's say you meet the criteria, you're already nationally certified, you've been working with a doctor for 4 years, so you've met the criteria full time, so you've met the criteria. You still have to work in a building where there are other physicians, but you just don't have to have standing orders. So full practice authority is the ability to be able to practice to the fullest extent of the scope of your practice as an advanced practice nurse. And that varies by the state, but the states decide when you get to practice to the fullest extent, right? And so for California, it's the 4,600 hours, it's nationally certified. And then, even then, they still want you to practice in a building where there are other physicians. Now, let's say you're like, all right, so I have to still work still work in a building. Yeah, they want you to still work around other physicians before you can practice on your own, like be in your own brick and mortar away and you are the head person. You cannot do that yet. And so for those who want to be able to do that, you have to have another 3 years where you're working under in the same space, but without standardized orders, for 3 years. So now we're up to 6 years, okay, before you can actually be on your own without a medical director practice. The benefit of California is they're not requiring us yet. Okay, it's not official yet until January 1st. So we don't know what they're going to fight for, change. The medical board is not happy about this. So we don't know what changes they're going to make. But as of right now, they're not saying yet, like, okay, if you're practicing in aesthetics, then you need, or cosmetics, you can't practice independently ever. Like, they can turn around and say something like that. They haven't, and that's not up on the site. But I want you guys to understand that full practice authority is not a one size fits all. Versus Nevada, as soon as you graduate, because when I was in the postmaster certificate program, there was a lot of nurses who were from Nevada. As soon as they graduate, got their boards, they're on their own, able to practice. That's not the case in every state. So it's important that you understand really what it means, you guys. And really what it is there's 3 different levels. So no matter what state you're in, your state, when it comes to full practice authority, falls under 3 different categories. Either they are restricted practice, they are reduced practice, or they are full practice. Restricted practice, as the word suggests, you have more restrictions. You have barely any autonomy as a practitioner, and you have to have a physician. It's very, very close to a nurse, except you're practicing medicine, right? So it's within the medical realm, but you still have to have orders. You still have to have, a lot of things are protocols in place. Versus a reduced practice state. With the reduced practice state, you don't have as many restrictions in your role as an advanced practice nurse, but you still have to have a collaborator. So you can't go out and work on your own at no time. You still have to have a collaborator, even if they're not physically present, which in most cases, especially in this day and age, telehealth is fine, but you still have to have a collaborator. Versus when you have a full practice state, either they let you do it right off, like in Nevada, or they say, okay, yeah, you can practice independently, but you have to meet this criteria. And then they may say it doesn't apply to these different states. So yeah, California says you have to do this, but Maine says you have to do that in order to apply. And then when you get down to your DEA and different scheduled drugs and what you can prescribe, that changes as well. So here's what I want you guys to know when it comes to this full practice authority. It's not a blanket. It's not a one size fit all. Every state is different. If you are a nurse, even if you're not an advanced practice nurse, if you're a nurse or if you're an advanced practice nurse, you should know what that means for your state, especially those who are considering entrepreneurship. You should know that, because it's ultimately going to affect you. Now, with that being said, does that mean that you can't do it or you shouldn't do it? No, like I said, this is a capitalistic country. So what you do is you need to figure out who you need to have on your team so that you are legal and you're compliant, but that you can still own your business. There are people here in our state is a corporate practice of medicine state, which is considered like one of the strictest states. And there are people who own urgent cares and medical clinics who are not in healthcare. So it is something that can be done, but like if you haven't taken the time to study and know and research what that means for you in your state, then that you're already behind the 8 ball. And that is the biggest challenge for a lot of people. So yes, you really do have to know, because as it pertains to entrepreneurship, the strategy you're going to take is going to be different. So when I'm talking to my clients, the first thing I say is, okay, what state are you in? What's your background? Are you a bachelor's prepared nurse? Are you a nurse practitioner? And then I say, okay, if it's a bachelor's prepared nurse and they're trying to start their aesthetic practice, but they live in a state that's a full practice state, the next thing I'm going to do is research, or if I already know, which I've done so much research, so most likely I'll know if their nurse practitioners are able to be medical directors in aesthetics. So then the next thing is like, okay, you don't necessarily have to get a medical doctor to be your medical director in that state. So you can get a nurse practitioner to be your medical director. That's a lot more feasible for us and easier for us. Not that it can't happen with a medical doctor, but our own limitations is what prevents us from doing that. So I would tell you a different strategy versus if you're a nurse practitioner and you are in a restricted practice or a reduced practice state, you know you're going to need a medical doctor or, whomever the state has decided is a medical practitioner to be your medical director or your collaborator, right? So a lot of people just need to know that, you guys. That's how we get to entrepreneurship. We have to take the time and research and really understand our licenses. Like, have you ever wondered how especially people who have worked in small, in Maryland, you guys have full practice authority, Dawn. And so I haven't seen any restrictions that is based on specialty for nurse practitioners to be your medical director. So I don't think there's any challenge with that. But again, do your own research just to make sure. But I haven't, and I've researched most states. So I forgot what I was saying now. But the main thing is, you guys, I was going to say, is some of you who have worked in small community hospitals, have you ever, and I know you haven't because we just don't think along those lines, but have you ever thought about when you're in these small community hospitals, there is no doctor in-house in a night shift? There's no doctors on night shift in-house, usually, right? There's usually a nursing supervisor who is usually a senior nurse, right? Who can at least start the codes if they don't run the codes should a code happen, right? There's usually not doctors, especially if it's a small community hospital. It's not a teaching hospital, so certain doctors have their own patients, right? And if something's going on with their patients, you call the doctor and you say, hey, patient Doe potassium is this, like, what do you want me to do? Whatever, right? They're not in-house. So how are you able to still practice? Is it just because it's a hospital? No, it's because they don't have to be there as long as you're able to reach them and contact them for their patients. So generally speaking, that same concept is what we use in the medspa bootcamp. That's what we use. So it was never the plan for us to start our own businesses and to leverage our licenses, you guys. The plan was for us to get these licenses and work in these hospitals until we're 65. Probably by the time we retire, it'll be 75, who knows? But that was the plan. So now the same rules that they've made up to look out for the physicians, we're leveraging that for our own interests as well in starting businesses. That's exactly what's happening. And I just wanted to come on here for a few minutes and kind of talk to you guys about that. I hope I've educated somebody though. Like, and even if you're not an advanced practice nurse and you're thinking about it, you need to know this. Like, I always am like amazed at how many nurses, the first thing, like when they're tired of the bedside, the first thing they want to do is go to NP school. And so people even ask me, they're like, hey, what do you think about? And I'm like, well, why are you doing it? Like, what is your goal? It's like, we feel like that's just the normal progression. It's like, okay, I'm a bedside nurse, did that. Now I'm going to go to NP school. But have you ever talked to anyone who is actually working as a nurse practitioner in primary care? Have you talked to them? Because a lot of them will tell you they are overworked too. No, they may not be wiping butts, but they're overworked as well. So like if you're jumping out the frying pan into the fire, basically, and going in debt doing it, by the way, because you haven't taken the time to research and really sit down and figure out what the hell you want to do. Like, do you really want to go? And then a lot of them, and I say them, like I'm a nurse practitioner too, but y'all, I did mine for my business. Had no desire to work in primary care, because all of my colleagues that I knew who went that route, they were so unhappy. They were like, the doctors are getting like half the patients. They do the same thing that we do. We get a heavier workload and we get paid less. That's not what you signing up for. So if you hear that, you're like, okay, do I really want to go into debt for this? Unless you have a plan for it. And that's different. So that's why I say be intentional. Like, think about what you want with your life. What do you want your life to look like? And then reverse engineer that and figure out what you need to do. Don't feel like the only thing that makes sense is for you to go to MP school if it's not going to be in alignment with what your overall goals are for yourself. So those who don't know about their own state, what I want to recommend for you, go to the Board of Registered Nursing website and research your damn state. That's your homework today. Stop waiting for other people to tell you what you can and cannot do. Stop listening to even me. I'm on Instagram. Y'all don't know me from a can of paint. Go do your own research. Be informed. That's the biggest takeaway. If you are considering that being a nurse practitioner, be informed. Be informed. That's the biggest takeaway. Imagine that, you guys, going to school for something that's going to help you in your business where you will have no ceiling on how much money you can make. No ceiling, you guys. And there are so many things you can do that's not working in primary care if that's not what you want to do. And I hate to feel like I'm being attacked, because I'm not attacking nurse practitioners at all, by the way. I'm just saying, like, people don't be knowing what they're getting into. At what expense is always my question. So like, I have nurses, sometimes I get on calls with them and they're like, I make 10K a month, a week. I make 10,000 a week. I make 25,000 a month. And I'm just like, but at what cost? And that's the question we don't ask. It's like, I would rather make 10,000 a month if I could be able to spend time with my kids, spend time with my mom, pick them up from school, cook breakfast, than if I'm making 25K a month and I don't see my family, I'm stuck somewhere that's different. So I am not jealous of you for your 25K with the trade-off. So that's the question. That's the hard question that we don't ask each other or say to ourselves, I should say, enough. Like, why would you do that when there are opportunities out here where you can actually have both and you have no ceiling and you can make way more money? Like, wouldn't you rather do that? I don't know. That's just how I look at things now. My mind is just totally different. I was like that too, though. My bank account was determined by shifts. My trips were determined by shifts. If I had something going on, I would pick up an extra shift. But now I'm just like, damn, that's 13 hours of my life. And out here on the freeway, at least 2.5 hours on the freeway going round trip. Like, that's 16 hours of my life I can't get back. I'm not willing to trade that, especially when there's so much drama going on and lack of appreciation, all that stuff. It's just not a good trade-off for me anymore at this point in my life. But does that mean if something ever happened and I couldn't work that I wouldn't get my ass back out there for my family? I absolutely would. So I'm not talking about nobody, because I would do it if I had to for my kids. Gotta work smarter, not harder. Yep. I want to make sure I'm giving y'all mad value on your journey, whatever it is that you're doing. Even if you're not considering aesthetics, you're considering entrepreneurship, if you're thinking about leaving the bedside, if you're thinking about staying, whatever it is, send me a DM and I'll definitely talk about that. Yeah, bedside is definitely a backup. I'm not too good for I'll get my ass right there in bedside. I actually I always liked bedside. That's why I stayed 7 years per diem. Like, I liked bedside. It's the same reason everybody else has a problem. We all really do like taking care of people. But when you add the politics, the bureaucracy, the lack of appreciation, that starts to take its toll, especially when we give so much and sacrifice so much. So I think for the most part, nurses like nursing. All right, you guys, take care. Love y'all. I'll see y'all sometime tomorrow. Make sure your notifications are turned on. Take care, y'all. Bye.